the set of Unconfined Conversations. Look out on all of our social media platforms for an upcoming video of behind the set of Unconfined Conversation, where one of us is going to be talking about some of the things that you see behind us and what they are and where they came from. That means you.
Oh, it's like behind me. Who's behind me?
Well, Halloween just passed, so you never know who's going to come out of the woodwork and try to scare somebody.
Right.
So here on Unconfined Conversations, we aim to talk about things related to incarceration and the men and women who have experienced incarceration, both currently and formerly, and how that incarceration has impacted their lives. So before we get into it, as you can see, we're both kind of wearing long sleeves here today. The fall weather is, I think, officially here.
Fall.
Maybe winter?
I think winter.
Maybe.
We had snow this past week.
Well, we did.
Light skiff.
A little bit, yes. There is an impossible amount of leaves in my yard, unfortunately, that I have to take care of. But it is the season, and as we start talking about some of these issues related to incarcerated individuals, we just want to recognize the fact that with the holidays coming up, that there are going to be families that are separated from each other and who are going to have sometimes a difficult time,
Sure.
With their loved one who is not going to be present during these family get-togethers and traditions that have been long-standing. And it's really, really hard on a lot of families on the outside, but also hard for the individuals who are on the inside too.
Agreed.
Because they're separated. So keep your thoughts and prayers with the families and with the individuals who are incarcerated during these holiday seasons. So today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to kind of piggyback off of last week's episode, and we're going to be talking about programming in how it relates to recidivism. And with programming, we're going to be talking about state-sponsored programming. We're going to be talking about religiously sponsored programming, educationally sponsored programming, but also inmate-sponsored programming, and what the definitions of all those are, and how they affect the men and women who are inside, and how that affects their journey into getting out of prison and staying out of prison,
Sure.
and what that means. So programming is something that maybe when you go to prison that you don't really think about all that often. You're thinking about just surviving. You're thinking about getting through the day and the next week and the next month. You're worried about hygiene on commissary. You're worried about trying to get a job to get a little bit of money. Those are the things that you're worried about, and those are the things that are right in front of you.
Right.
It's almost as if like you have blinders on because you're not seeing the full scope and the full picture of your time that's ahead of you.
Right.
You're not looking at it in totality.
Sure.
You're looking at it in a very small segment. So for guys and gals who go to prison, they're not thinking about the long-term impact of participation in programming, but it's absolutely something that they should be thinking about.
Sure.
And today we're going to be talking about those types of programming and the effect on it. Steve and I both, we did a lot of time, and, the types of programming that we intentionally involved ourselves with, but also the types of programming that were made available to us at different points, greatly affected how we navigated our time, but also greatly affected how we matured and became better men because of that programming. So, Steve, talk about some of the types of programming that you witnessed while you were inside and how that affected others that you saw participating in that programming, and also how it affected you when you were able to participate in that programming as well.
For sure. I give a shout out to two people. that I can think of right out the gate: Larry Anderson and Michelle Weissif, or Michelle Stratman. I can't remember what she went by. But two people who absolutely cared and allowed for me to take some soft computer skill programs. Anger management was one, and Larry Anderson.
Impact of crime on victims was
Impact-
one of his big classes.
I don't think I took that one, but I've heard about it.
Yeah.
Parenting. And
parenting classes.
Parenting class taught
Yeah.
me was it taught me to have the perspective of my father, who, if you've ever heard my story, I was raised in a fatherless home. So I had a lot of bitterness and anger and animosity towards my father for not ever being there, not showing me, what it means to be a man. And here I go through the parenting class, and it just, whoa, what? Like this stuff's here, and this is what my father should have been doing but didn't. And I started to work towards forgiveness in that.
So how did you get involved in the parenting class? Like, what was that process like for you?
Well, you mentioned the word programming. If you remember years ago, they had kind of an elective credits that a person can participate in willingly. Back then it was required for you to have a certain amount of electives every year. So you would sign up through the school, you would talk to the teacher, talk to the person in charge of the education program. You'd see things on the bulletin boards on the units or what have you. And then you just submit a kite, and just wait. Your name would most likely get added to a waiting list. I talked about anger management, anger resolution, which there's a difference between the two. Anger management I took during kind of a educational sanctioned opportunity, and then the anger resolution I took through the church. AVP we had, and that's not Alien versus Predator.
Great movies, by the way, but definitely not a state sponsored type of programming. Define what AVP is.
Okay, get that smile off my face. It's called Alternatives to Violence Project, and it was started by the Quakers.
Correct.
And they basically seen a need for, I'll just say it, alternatives to violence. Violence doesn't have to be the only option. Sure, it's something that I've chosen. It's something that I felt, I was influenced, whether it be through music, whether it be through some of my friends, that violence is the key to resolving my problems. But again, this gets back to anger resolution, where I needed to discover what was helping fuel the anger in my heart, what was helping fuel the violent responses that I was having, particularly to older men who really tried to kind of boss me around. And what I found was that was really deep-seated resentment in my heart against my father for not ever being there.
So AVP really helped you to be introspective as far as your own feelings and your own trauma and your own emotions.
Sure.
When it came to your father, and then helped you to resolve some of those issues within yourself. And, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that brought you a lot of peace. Whereas before you maybe didn't have peace when it came to that.
Agreed. It brought a tremendous amount of peace, and it's kind of basic. Like everybody thinks, not everybody, when you hear that title, Alternatives to Violence, I think somebody who's never committed an act of violence maybe might say like, well, that's a no-brainer. Like violence doesn't have to be an option, but we learned that there's other forms of violence, that don't involve these guys. It can be an attitude. It can be cussing people out. It could be having, kind of an angry response or an angry tone to things in your family. And people just see like, hey, this person is, the silent treatment is another one. which I've employed before in my life. And like all these things are a form of violence that I'm looking to act upon somebody else, So in my heart, like I had to see just some of those dark, ugly areas to say, I don't want to be like this anymore.
So participating in that type of programming really was beneficial for you because you had a lot of deep-seated feelings and emotions about different areas in your life, but through programs like AVP or anger resolution, any of those types of self-help programming, those really benefited you a lot. But, talk a little bit also about the mental participation on your part and your willingness to buy into the programming.
Sure.
And how important that was for that programming to really affect you. Buying into the programming or not buying into it, either going through the motions or actually saying, hey, I'm going to work this and I'm going to get as much out of it as I possibly can. Talk a little bit about the difference in mentality when it comes to people participating in those types of programming.
Sure. It means the difference. For me, like the foundation was having a radical heart change first. And once I had that, I started to see things differently. I started to see things through just a different lens. And at that point, I would say in my inner man, I needed to start focusing on some of this stuff. I couldn't just ignore it. I couldn't just say, that never happened. I was never violent. I've never been angry. Why am I in prison? Like all these things were just very obvious before me.
Like you had to look yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
Really hard.
Yeah.
And be able to admit things to yourself.
Admit things to myself and men like yourself, men who cared, to tell me the truth and give me constructive, honest feedback to really stay in my face about issues and say, you know what? How you treated that officer, how you treated that other brother wasn't exactly in line with your belief system, So I had to start really digging down and looking into some of this. But I would say it took other people too. It took other people both to facilitate the classes that we were participating in, to facilitate the conversation, and just maybe some walking the track therapy as well. Walking the track in prison. For those of you who are listening, we'd just walk together, just two guys side by side, and just conversing about life and experiences and maybe issues that were present as we're like hashing it out. Like, what do you think about this? And hey, this is how I responded to my supervisor while in prison.
Yeah, like walking the track. For those of our listeners who don't know, walking the track in prison is really like a social thing that we do to not only exercise, but we socially connect with other men. And so in every prison, there is a rec yard. So in fair weather, we would be allowed to go out to the rec yard and exercise. We could play cards. We could do lots of other types of things. During colder weather, like during the fall and winter, we would be inside, but there would still be areas where we could walk and walk laps, but it's still walking the track.
Agreed.
And walking the track was something that, like, let's say there was something that I really needed to get off my chest. I needed to get some counseling on. I needed to just vent. I needed to do something with it. I needed to get it out. And I would say to my friend Steve, I would say, hey, Steve, let's go walk the track. And he knew exactly what that meant. It meant, hey, my brother needs me. My brother needs me to listen, not necessarily even give advice, but just be able to be there and to just listen.
Sure.
That's what walking the track is. And, that is kind of like what I mentioned earlier as far as the different types of programming. That is a form of basically inmate-sponsored programming.
Agreed.
that was hugely beneficial, I think, to you and I and to hundreds of other men and women who have been inside who utilize walking the track as a way to understand things about themselves, to work out problems, to be able to heal, to be able to run things by somebody else so that they can make a better decision about something that's going on in their life.
Sure.
And, the inmate-sponsored programming is really two types. There's a positive type, like walking the track, like sitting down and having a cup of coffee. So probably, I don't know, you can probably correct me on the timeline here, but probably for the last 8 years or so that Steve and I were incarcerated, not every single, but the vast majority of our Saturdays were getting up in the morning, and this would be after count, and we would get up, make a cup of coffee, and Steve, myself, and usually 1 to 2 other gentlemen.
Wally Farm Boys.
Shout out to Wally LaFron boys. We would get up and go down to the day hall, and we would play pool or snooker. And we would have coffee. We would have cookies or donuts that we had bought off of the commissary. And, we were down there. It wasn't about pool. It wasn't about snooker at all. That's just what we were doing. But what we were really doing was really tightening our friendships. We were talking about things that were important to us. It was a relief from the chaos that was normal, everyday prison stuff. Because we were just telling stories, we were laughing, we were getting things off our chest, whatever it was, that was a really important thing.
Sure.
And that is a really great example of like a positive inmate-led type of programming. We didn't call it that, but that's exactly what it was.
Right.
On the other side, on the flip side, or for our older listeners, it's the B side. For those of you who remember vinyl records.
Oh, I thought it was tapes. Like I remember.
Well,
side
I mean,
A,
there's
side A, side B. Sir Mix-a-Lot. I'm just playing.
Wait, what?
No, yeah. So I heard.
Oh, so we've heard. We've heard.
Yeah.
But on the B side is inmate-sponsored, inmate-led types of programming where there is indoctrination of prison culture that is contrary and actually a force that works against great personal and positive changes that are needed within a person.
Agreed.
So that when they have the chance to get out of prison, that they do not recidivate, or at least they have a greater chance of not recidivating. And, those are things that, men like you and I had to really decide on early on, like, which way are we going to go here? You have talked about numerous times on this platform about coming to a head point where you made a conscious decision. I'm not going to go down this road. I have to go down this other road, because if I don't, my whole life is never going to change. I'm always going to be the same, and I'm never going to become the man that I know that I can be.
Literally, if I had not made that choice, same for you, this will be the rest of our lives, incarcerated or not. So be bitter, be angry, be just rage-filled the rest of my life, or be free and healed and healing from those things that once plagued me and led me down that path of violence.
And that's where, like, buying into programming is really important. It's very, very important. And Steve and I both agree on this, that to have programming available within the walls, state-sponsored or educationally sponsored or religiously sponsored programming, to have it available to the men and women who are incarcerated is absolutely necessary. It is critical to have that available so that they can participate in these types of programs and begin having the great personal changes that men like Steve and I have been able to have. But on the other side of it, there has to be, as Steve just pointed out, a willingness to participate in those programs. And Steve and I have both witnessed over the years what it looks like for people who buy into programming and people who don't buy into programming. The people who don't buy into programming, they just go through it. They're just checking off the boxes. They're going through the motions because it's what's required of them. They don't really care about the literature. They don't care about the curriculum. They don't care about any of those types of things. They're just going through it so they can get on to the next phase of their sentence and they can get ready to get out. And in most cases, not all, but in most cases, those folks end up not making those great personal changes. And we have seen them get out, come back, get out, come back, get out, come back numerous times because they're just in a season in their life where they are not able to open up their ears or their minds to be able to say, I need to change.
Right.
And whether that is coming from social pressures, whether that's coming from familial pressures, whether that's just coming from just plain old pride, whatever it is, they're just not able to do it.
Right.
But the people who are able to say, you know what, I don't care what anybody else thinks, I need to do this for me. And who say, maybe it sounds cheesy, maybe it's kind of corny, maybe it sounds a little bit lame, but I'm going to go and do this programming and I'm going to buy into it. And I'll just give a great example of this. There was a guy, so in prison, I worked in the welding shop and I also taught welding for a little while. And every 6 weeks, we would have a new class of welding students, 12 students at a time. They would learn blueprint reading, they would learn math, they would learn welding symbols. And there was a guy who had grown up in the city his whole life. He had never grown up or was interested in trade skills at all. But he knew that if he participated in the welding class, he would get these earned discharge credits, which would help him get out of prison earlier. And so he decided to sign up and he participated in it. But he had no real interest in welding. It was just a thing to help him get out of prison earlier. Well, he started to participate in this program and he really started to like it. And once he got done with the classroom and he got down onto the welding floor and he is actually starting to weld and have his gear on, bonding two pieces of metal together, something clicked in him. And he became so interested, and he became one of our best students with some of the highest scores that we had ever seen. And when he got out, he pursued a career in welding because he just found a passion in it. And so even if somebody maybe in the beginning may not think, well, this isn't for me, or I'm just going to go through the motions or whatever, the fact that programming was made available gave that person an opportunity to be able to discover something about themselves that, hey, I never knew that I would enjoy this.
Sure.
Or in the case of maybe AVP or alternative or any of the other self-help classes, maybe you start participating in it while I'm just kind of going through the motions. I want to get out of myself. But then you realize, man, this is really something here. I really like this. This is helping me to understand a lot of things. So to have the programming available is so critically important. And I think that's the hope of both Steve and I, and of many, many others as well, that the types of programming that could be made available to the men and women who are behind bars, and even to get much more specific here, in the new prison that's going to be built here in South Dakota, that the types of programming that have empirically been proven to show positive results when it comes to reducing recidivism, they have to be present within these new walls that will be constructed. Because if they're not, if they're not given the money for it, if they're not given the physical space for these types of programmings, the inmates are going to be the ones to suffer.
Sure.
Their families are going to be the ones to suffer, and society is going to be the ones to suffer.
Agreed.
Certainly.
And there's no harshness in that whatsoever.
Correct.
What you're saying. It's just saying
Absolutely.
that you have wasted potential sitting within the walls and fences of our South Dakota institutions. Here's a perfect opportunity. We've got a task force assigned to this. Here's the perfect opportunity to get it right. Are you going to get it 100% right? No. But to have this attitude of care and concern, that I'm concerned about the next generation. I'm concerned about these men's families as they get out and they're tasked with leading. I'll just use me as an example. You know, you're tasked with leading a family that you don't know how to lead, you know, but thank the Lord that I've had opportunity to participate in parenting like opportunities. I would just say state provided programming. But let me be clear in this, because this is important. We kind of skip past this. If a person doesn't subscribe to programming that's provided them, they no doubt will subscribe to programming that is there, be it in the general population, the cultural mindset that we kind of alluded to, or through the television, through this. This has become the state of South Dakota's babysitter.
Tell the folks who are just listening what you're doing.
I'm pushing my thumb as to push the button on a remote. You know, I've got a remote in my hand now. And this is it. And as I'm sitting there years on end, I'm listening to what these different channels are talking about. I'm subscribing to political thoughts, one way or the other, and just listening, paying attention. I'm being programmed. All of a sudden, I'm starting to think a certain way. And if any of you think I'm saying this in the positive, I'm saying it in the negative, because we're seeing a generation of people, young folks. I've seen it. I've witnessed it firsthand. Young folks who have grown up through the internet, through the culture of life, you know, through, I'll be bold and say it, through an agenda of what's being pushed on somebody to say, this is what you need to think about these particular things. These are the attitudes that you need to have about this particular train of thought, be it politically, be it religiously, be it educationally, be it criminally, you know, like, hey, this is what you need to think, and these are your now your code of ethics that you operate by. But to me, it's we're losing at that particular point. A television cannot be a substitute for something meaningful to be brought about. And again, circling back around with this task force, you've been entrusted with the responsibility to come up with something that can help influence generations to come. Because no doubt we know that there's a number that says the prisons are filling up, and they're filling up with longer and longer sentences due to sentencing guidelines changing within the state of South Dakota of recent. So this just means that you're going to have people sitting in the system longer. It's upon this task force, this administration, this governor, this secretary of corrections to make that decision and make it well, because it's going to mean something for many people to come. And you've said it well. Families are going to suffer. We don't want that. I don't want that. My brother right here, he doesn't want that. We don't want families to suffer another generation. I'll use my perspective of fatherlessness. I don't want another generation of young men who are pushed into the system angry and bitter, and to not have another brother, to not have a sister, to not have a volunteer or even a staff member to say, you know what, we've got a class that I think you're a prime candidate for. You're angry now. You're in and out of the shoe, but guess what? We're just starting up this program, and we think that you'd be a prime candidate to be able to go into this class. Not because we think like you're reckless or you're a lost cause, but we believe in the potential of change.
So what you're saying is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is the participation of the men and women in programming now, whether that's in the current South Dakota DOC facilities or in the new facility that will be built, that if positive, life-changing programming can be instituted and made available to those men and women, that they can change to the point where when they are with their families, their sons, their daughters, their nieces, their nephews, that they can begin changing the culture of their next generation, where potentially that next generation will be more well equipped to deal with the things that life throws at everybody, and that they can make the better decisions that they need to make in their lives so that they don't even have to go to prison in the first place.
Agreed.
So it's talking about making long-lasting generational changes
Absolutely.
within people.
Right.
You're really talking about changing culture and changing society.
That's what it is.
And maybe that sounds really grand, but that's
not.
exactly what it is. And it can start with the decisions that the legislature and the Department of Corrections that they can make right now can start the ball rolling on that type of great cultural and generational change. And I think that's what we really want, is for people to understand that programming isn't just GED, which is incredibly important. We haven't mentioned that yet. That programming isn't just self-help classes. Programming isn't just, it's all of it together. It all works symbiotically and collectively.
Yeah. Symbiotically is a good word. I love that.
Yes. Kudos for me at this late hour to come up with a multi-syllable word like symbiotically. But anyway, it all works together, and there has to be a buy-in from the inmates, but there also has to be a buy-in to the potentiality of who these men and women can become from the staff, from the DOC. There has to be a belief that, hey, we can help these men and women change. And I think that's what we want in the end, is for people to believe in this change, and not just the inmates themselves, but the people who are helping to facilitate these programs as well.
You said it, but I'm just going to reinforce what you said. It has to, we recently responded to a comment that was in one of the comment sections of our Facebook page, or one of our posts or something. And it was basically the person scolding us because they felt like we're just being a bunch of politicians sitting around talking about change. But I responded, not angrily, but I responded, I would say gracefully. I said, we believe in rehabilitation within the system. And to me, that within the system involves staff and administration as well. If they can adopt administration, if administration and staff can adopt the mentality that, hey, at the end of the day, these are just people. These are people that are loved, are cared about, who were once children, who were once our peers, who will, no doubt, walk the streets, majority, walk the streets of society again. I want these people to come out better than when they went in. A little shout out to former warden Darren Young. That's his mentality. He's been quoted in newspapers as saying that, like, these men are going to come out of the system. I want them to come out better. Such a great attitude.
It is a great attitude. And, I think if that type of attitude could be reflective in more staff members or members of the administration or even members of the government, or
From the top down.
From the top down.
It's from the top down. That's the way it works.
If that type of attitude can be made the norm, then the potential for people coming out of prison is limitless.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's truly limitless.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we hope to do here on Unconfined Conversations, is to encourage people to think differently about things that really impact whether or not somebody is going to succeed when they get out of prison, whether they're going to come back to prison, and what are the factors that go into those things. And so as we continue to have these discussions and these unconfined conversations, we want to encourage all of our listeners and all of our viewers to think to themselves, what do I want to see with the men and women who are coming out of prison? Do I want to have neighbors and coworkers and fellow churchgoers and people that I'm just around every day? Do I want them to be well-rounded? Do I want them to be healed? Do I want them to be someone that is unrecognizable as someone who used to be in prison? Do I want that? Or do I want to have the attitude of, they messed up, lock them up, throw away the key, and then when they come out, they're going to be just as bad as what they were when they went in?
If not worse.
If not worse. So as we wrap up today's episode, look for these. We'll hold it up to the camera there if you can see it. New business cards for Unconfined Conversations, on the front of which you'll see our logo and our social media platforms, and on the back you'll see our QR code for our YouTube channel. If you see these floating around Sioux Falls, don't be surprised. We're not going to drop them from airplanes, we promise. But anyway, on behalf of Steve and I, thank you again to all of our sponsors, to all of our supporters. Thank you to everybody who has liked and subscribed to all of our social media platforms. And we would encourage you that as you continue to watch and listen to Unconfined Conversations, if you like what you hear, drop a comment and let us know what you think. Also, share it with those who you think could benefit from hearing what we have to say.
For sure.
So until next time, I'm Ryan. This is Steve in episode 4 of Unconfined Conversations, and we'll see you next time.